Welcome to Sustainable Leadership Live. I'm Lisa Danforth, your host, and today we have Karen Leitner here chatting with us. Karen, I'm super excited to talk about negotiation and you bringing all your brilliance today. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much. This is so fun to talk with you about this.
Before we jump in, I just want to share a little bit about Karen and why she is here chatting with us and sharing her brilliance with us. Karen is a primary care physician and an experienced life coach. She helps women physicians feel better and happier in their lives by empowering them to overcome work-life overwhelm, imposter syndrome, parenting challenges, and all the other joy kills so common to women physicians and that is so rarely talked about until nowadays. And today, Karen's going to be sharing with us negotiation, why we can't afford to not advocate for ourselves. I love that title. So I say, let's jump right in. You ready?
Let's do it. I'm ready.
All right. So question, how did you get into this as a physician and a life coach? I'd love to hear that story.
Yeah. So I don't think this was on my radar at all until I had finished medical school, college medical school residency. And I was interviewing for my first job. And my program director at my program was a man, told me I had to ask for more, I had to negotiate. And it was like, I don't know if I was living under a rock. I'm not sure why, but I was like, why do I have to? And he was like, you just do. And this is how you do it. And I still remember I had this like yellow steno pad that I had written out the words I was going to say to the hiring manager. And it was like, I was so nervous. I was in my mom's living room sitting on this like old flowery couch. And I was like, I have a lot of loans and will be moving. I need whatever. And I felt like I was going to barf. And it worked. So I can't remember what they offered me, but I think I got a $10,000 signing bonus, which at the time, out of training with all these loans, I thought I like won the lottery. And I also thought for probably the next 10 or 15 years that I was an amazing negotiator until I realized later on that, yes, a signing bonus is great, but it's a one-time thing versus when you get your salary to be increased, that's like forever. And then that's, where you're starting for your next negotiation. So but that's where it all started for me. And then I was shocked at how few of my other colleagues were doing this and how no one talked to us about it. And I'm a middle child and fairness is very important to me. My parents used to say my favorite thing to say as a kid was like, it's not fair. It's not fair. And so when I realized there's a difference between like a man and a woman accepting a position and being paid differently for equal work, I was like, oh no. And I just got really interested in trying to learn as much as I could about it. And yeah, that's where we are today. Now I try to help other women sort of learn what I've learned and even just have not even confidence, it's like awareness to realize that it's a thing you can even do. I feel like that's what's so tricky about negotiation is so much of the time I will, send an email or I will say something about negotiation. And for a lot of people, it's just like, well, that doesn't apply to me. I don't even know what she's talking about. Right? I had a client tell me that. It's like, we don't even realize that it's something we can do, should do, can get better at, and that it's really important for society also that we not accept the status quo, which is to underpay women and underrepresented minorities, et cetera. So that was how I got my start. And now I have 3 daughters. So, gender pay disparity, I just don't want that. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of work cut out for us if we're going to move the needle on that.
So I'm really hearing like just awareness is a big piece of, that you can ask for more and that you actually should ask for more. I'd love to hear like when you work with women, helping them figure out how to negotiate, ask for more, ask for benefits, whatever it may be, like what are some of the pushbacks that you get, that you hear mostly when you're talking with someone?
Yeah, I think there's this idea that we are already paid fairly, but this just doesn't apply to me. Oh yeah, I understand there's a gender pay gap and like women make 82 cents on the dollar and even in medicine women make that much, but like not at my job because they told me I couldn't negotiate. They say that everyone is paid equally. Or I had someone say to me, this isn't pushback, but this is just, again, like it hasn't permeated our consciousness that this is a real thing. And so, yeah, someone was like, well, the insurers pay us all the same. I'm paid a certain amount for the kind of visit I do. So we all get paid the same, not realizing that you can negotiate how much you're paid per unit that they measure your productivity in, or not realizing that, it's really insidious sometimes, but like we are paid based on our professional like title in academia, if we've been promoted or not. And then it's like, oh, and is it just happenstance that men are much more likely to then get promoted and then earn more? Oh, it's fair because it's your promotion, but the whole system is not built around like equity. It's actually built around inequity. And so it is, you know, hard to push. But for the individual person, I think it's like really uncomfortable for us. And I'm making such big generalizations, but like as women, we're socialized to be nice and to be helpers, and our whole value comes from being caretakers and by giving and being, you know, smiling and so
and not being greedy, right?
yeah. So it's really uncomfortable to say like, actually, I deserve this. Like that just feels really, really uncomfortable. So we have to, like you were talking about, the mindset piece is so important to even recognize you do have enough value to then go ask for it and not let someone else determine what your value is.
A belief, a real belief system that stops us. That I think often, at least I see this in my business, we're not even aware of it. It's a belief that's driving our behavior. So what I'm really hearing you say is the first step is education, is opening up their eyes, education that you can do something different. Is what's going on. And almost sort of, it's the inspiration to start moving things is actually opening up the eyes and saying, hey, wait a minute, that's not right. So this sounds like such a silly question. We were kind of talking about it in the green room, but you know, why? Why is it important for women to learn how to negotiate other than just to get an equal amount of money as their male counterparts?
Yeah. Well, I have this quote I brought that I love. I'm going to maybe paraphrase it. But this is another coach who I respect greatly, who is like a feminist mindset coach. Her name is Cara Lowenthal. And she said this about money, but but I think it applies to negotiation too. It's something like when women are hesitant to negotiate, they don't understand that by opting out of the system, they're continuing to ensure that it's rigged against them. And so when we don't ask for what we deserve, we're not even talking about we're not asking for more necessarily. We're asking for equal pay, right? This isn't about like, because that's another thing that comes up for clients. Well, I don't need a ton of money. And I didn't go into medicine to make money. I just really want to take good care of my patients. It's fascinating to me. I had a client once where we, you know, one of the things I do in my program is I provide there's a kind of data set. They survey physicians all over the country. And then by geography and specialty, they say, this is the average salary that someone is paid. And she was like being paid below the 5th percentile. So, you know, in a specialty that's very, very important, you want these people. And she was so good at it. And so the response she had was like, well, the money isn't that important to me. And I don't. And it was like, that's not what this is about. This is about, you know, why should you be paid less than 95 other people in your specialty, like when what you're doing is so valuable? So I'm not sure if I'm really answering your question, but it's like society benefits when there's equity, diversity, inclusion, all these things. And with more money comes more impact. So this isn't like I want 1,000 Chanel purses, but it's like I can do things with the money I have that matter to me. More money, more impact. I want to do good in the world. I'm going to do more good having the money and giving it where I think it belongs than letting an employer, an insurance company, the establishment have it. And so I think that's part of the why for me is like, you deserve it. You've worked really hard for it. And why should someone else get more than you for the same work? And so the other thing you were saying is like, education is important, and I would agree, but it's still I think our brains want to kind of protect us, and they're just like, no, I'm sure I'm paid fairly, even though you're saying I'm not. It's scary to think about going up against a boss or a system and saying, pay me fairly. But what often happens is someone gets like information gets leaked. They find out that a colleague who was hired after them with fewer credentials and less training is being paid more. And then now they're like, okay, now they believe it because they've actually seen it. I think that's another piece that's complicated. And so the more we push for transparency at organizations, the more it's like, you can't, if no one's looking, it's easy not to see it. Right. Most institutions are like, well, we don't have any. It's like, well, if you're not looking to measure it, then of course you're not going to think you have it. Put it out there for the world to see.
How much do you think the discomfort of standing up, speaking for ourselves, speaking out and demanding pay equity, right? Demanding what we're worth, that discomfort gets in the way? And I understand that you're saying like people aren't even aware, but I think it's also very convenient and not blanketed, right? But it's very convenient to keep our head down because it is so uncomfortable to speak up. It is so uncomfortable to buck the trend and put the spotlight on us and say, hey, wait a minute, I need to have a conversation here. How much does that come into play, would you say?
A lot. Because they've done, one of my favorite books on negotiation is called Women Don't Ask. It's by Babcock and Leshever. And they look at all these studies, like when a woman is asked to just negotiate for herself, she doesn't do, in these studies, she'll do like a X kind of job. But when she's negotiating for someone else, she does a much better job. So there's that piece of like, I don't know if that's discomfort, but like, I think of it as, women acknowledging their accomplishments and being like, I am a phenomenal primary care doctor. I am a really good life coach. My clients are so well cared for. We don't like, society doesn't look favorably on us owning our accomplishments in that way, right? Like Serena Williams or like even, all these highly visible Hillary Clinton, we're just, there's a lot of barriers to us being able to own our success and to feel safe. I think it's almost like it's a safety issue sometimes.
Huge. I think safety comes into it.
There's a woman, I was just reading about this woman surgeon in Miami, I want to say, who is embroiled in a big like lawsuit because the institution, like she was a whistleblower for unfair pay practices. And then there was, and I don't know the facts, but it seems likely that like people you're rocking the boat. So there's like on a global scale, do you rock the boat? Do you worry about losing your job? But I feel like that's blown so far out of proportion that people are just like, I can't ask. Like, it's just really too uncomfortable.
Have you ever heard of the term double bind?
Yes.
Yeah. So double bind for women, where women are either perceived as warm or competent, but rarely both. And I like to think of like Hillary Clinton, Elizabeth Warren, right? So when we're competent, we're often seen as unfeminine. And when we're unfeminine as women, and again, blanketed term, but generally this has been so. When we're unfeminine, we're unlikable. And when we're unlikable, how do we have a successful business and a successful career? So we have to weave in that warmth, unfortunately. And men tend to not have to do that. And I just think that the not being seen as warm impacts us from stepping up. Do you know the stats on when women receive like personal feedback, professional feedback, as opposed to like actual metrics like that their sales are high above, but you need to be softer, you need to be kinder, you need to communicate more. Do you know what the stats are on that?
I don't know the stats, but it's definitely like there is a gendered language that, even if you take like equal candidates, the male candidate is going to have different characteristics, different adjectives used that are felt to be more like, there's bias that seeps in at every level, basically, of how we talk about women and men's characteristics. I think like one thing I wanted to sort of, if the idea is like, in order to negotiate, I have to come in with my guns blazing and be like, give me more money. No one's going to want to do that. But the really neat thing about negotiation is so much of the time, like if we can get past that mental obstacle, you're able to be promoting yourself in a way that also serves whoever you're negotiating with. So I think helping women understand that piece of it is also really useful, because when they're like, oh, I don't want to just go in there and demand something and say, give me more money. Like here's just one example is when we're trying to build the argument. And I think this comes from Never Split the Difference. I don't know if that book by Chris Voss, he's an FBI negotiator. So you're basically trying to convince them from their perspective. So what I might want to say is like, I deserve more money because I have lots of loans and I work really hard and I'm the primary breadwinner, right? That is not going to be as effective as a negotiator as when you come to your employer and you're like, I have the most longevity here, I have the largest patient panel, or I speak this language, or I have all these relationships with the community, or I brought in this much grants, or I oversee all these other providers, or I'm on this panel, or, you want to be sort of justifying it from their perspective, not your own perspective. And when you do that, it becomes very easy to see that, you are valuable and it will serve them to invest in you more than they are. So I think that's another, we have to get into the mindset that when you realize you're not just doing it for you, it's good for them also, it's easier to get over the hurdle of the discomfort.
I think that's in sales and negotiation, make it about the other person, because when we make it about ourselves, it's easy to dismiss us. So that was a great explanation of some how that's in there. So what are some other ways, how can people start to negotiate? How can women start to negotiate? What are the tools, the skills, the communication tips that you have for women to start stepping into their brilliance and asking and demanding their worth?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing is always like, how do you find out what your value even is, or what the value of the role is? And I think it's important to separate that, because if someone gives you the raise or doesn't give you the raise, it doesn't mean you are or aren't worth it. And I think that's a tricky piece, because we tend to take things so personally. It's like, this is the value of the role. So if you're negotiating for something, you need to know what the value is. You have to go out into the world. If it's a job, you go on like all those websites that talk about how much salary, the average salary for something. So for physicians, that used to be really, there's a gender equity negotiation coach that I learned a lot from named Katie Donovan. And when I would listen to her talk, she actually, and she helped pass the law in Massachusetts, which is where I live, that prohibits employers from asking you what your salary is when you go to a new job. And so I always am telling people, like, do not reveal what your current pay is. It doesn't matter. They ask you, let's like role play 10 different ways for you to just turn it back around again and be like, oh, well, what do you think this role would be worth? Well, like, how much are you getting? Well, what did you think someone with my years of experience and in this department, because it anchors us low. And so when you're underpaid at your first job and then you go to the interview for a next job and then they ask your salary and you tell them that, they map, they'll come down to where you are. So you just don't want to be revealing that. And now I completely lost my train of thought. Why was I talking about that? Katie Donovan. Oh, so she was saying, well, you need to just go out and find out what is the fair market value for this role. And it's very hard to find out how much doctors are paid. So I'm always like, yeah, I mean, there's some, national statistics. You could go, the Medscape does a physician compensation survey every year, but it's not like granular. And so one tip I have for people is that there's these surveys I was telling you about. There's like the MGMA data for physicians, and there's AGMA if they're in academia. And sometimes their hospital library will have a copy of that data from the prior year, which I didn't know, because otherwise you have to pay a lot of money to get it. So now the hospitals have all this data and they're measuring you against your peers and they're paying you based on it, but you don't even know what that is. So you want to be sitting at the table with like equal information. So you can try to get someone to share that data with you, see if your hospital library has it. Do the Googles, talk to recruiters, talk to people at your institution. And that's really tricky too, because it's frowned upon to talk about money as women in our society at work. So if you have a comfort level with a colleague, talk to them, or especially talk to someone who has left. If you had a colleague who went and got a job elsewhere, they're going to be more likely to want to share with you how much they're paid. Anyway, so find out how much the fair market value is for the role. And then manage your mindset, which is what I know you are such an expert in. But think about, what are the obstacles to you being able to ask for this? Like, help yourself create confidence for yourself that you deserve what you're asking for. And so I usually tell my clients, go write down like everything you've done since you've been at this
So
job.
powerful.
Yeah. And it's important to have a running list anyway. And this is different than those like 5 million page long CVs that people tend to have in academia. But it's like, what else did you do? What else did you do? Because what we tend to do is we like give this huge talk, or we organize this conference, or we, got these patient feedback, whatever. And then we just forget and we move on. But when you stop and you look and you're like, oh yeah, and I did that. And then I did that. And I remember when I was doing this for a negotiation, That did not go well, by the way, but I was working for this company and I realized that because of like, I was running $1 million program for them, just me, that they couldn't do without me. So you want to like maybe make that more explicit, because sometimes we think everyone knows what I'm doing, but no one knows what you're doing. No one knows all the stuff you're doing if you don't tell them. And women also, we think like, oh, that's too braggy. I don't want to just be rattling off how amazing I am. But some of our male counterparts are more comfortable doing that. So you make the list, you show yourself all the value you have, you think about what you want. Like sometimes when my clients are negotiating a job, they're at a job, they don't really love it, and they want to go elsewhere, and they're in the process of applying somewhere else. And then they're like, I'm just going to wait for that contract to come in and then see what they offer me and then decide. And I think that's not the way we should approach it. I always am saying to them, like, you decide what you want first. Like, how much do you want to make? And what else would make this like your dream job come true? Outside the box. Think outside the box.
And that creates the threshold, right? So they're stating the threshold that it can go up and down from. But if they're coming in without an anchor, I think that's so tough.
Yeah. And what I was also talking about, though, is there's so much more you can negotiate beyond just salary. There's like 35 things. So you want to be thinking about what would make this job like a dream job for me? Do I want to take a sabbatical in 2 years? Do I want a scribe to help me write my notes? Do I want an office? Do I want them to pay for coaching? Do I want them to pay for parking? What about childcare? What about loan repayment? What about travel expenses? But even the role of the job itself, like I have a client now who's looking at positions and she's looking at job descriptions and they're like 7 to 7, 4 days a week, like long shifts. And she's like, well, I don't really want to do that. And I was like, yeah, but you're the diamond and there's a huge shortage of what you offer. So you show up anyway. And then you say, it's interesting. That's not really going to work for me. Would you be open to 8 to 3 days? What do you have to lose? And I was just thinking there's also when women don't ask, they talk about like turnip people and oyster people. I don't eat turnips or oysters, but like you see the menu, there's turnips on it. You're like, I don't really like turnips. I guess that's what I have to choose from. And then men are like, do you have any oysters in the back? I want that. I have another colleague who was so well trained and skilled and had done all these fellowships and went to this job and tried to negotiate, did a decent job. And then again, some other whippersnapper came and like asked for this title she never would have thought about. And she wanted that title, but he asked for it and he got it, even though she really was more deserving of it. So you just want to be thinking about what else would I want? What else is going to help me in my career going forwards? And that's like all the preparation work you want to do to negotiate. But for most of us, because of those uncomfortable feelings, the anxiety or the insecurity or the fear, we tend to avoid. Like that's what leads us to procrastinate or just like so we just show up unprepared or underprepared. And then we do a worse job.
I'm really hearing we need to ask. There is history that comes into play. There are expectations and there are beliefs, but we need to be able to ask and think outside of the box. And one thing I love to say is just put on a different lens. So often we don't understand that the lens through which we're seeing, experiencing life is a lens that we can shift. It was designed and built throughout all of our years, and we don't even know that it's there. It's like the oxygen that we breathe. So to start thinking outside of the box and looking through a different perspective, a different lens, gives us the opportunity to ask for more of what we want.
I have language for that too with my clients that you just sort of, I didn't think about it as a lens, but there's this term learned helplessness that we have as physicians where we've had such little agency. You just apply to med schools, you go where you get in. You apply to residency, you go to where you get in. And then you apply for jobs and you just think like, I hope they take me. And then I'm just going to accept whatever they offer me because I can't like change or ask for different things. We're indoctrinated. You don't have that agency. You're not the value. Like you should just be lucky to have this thing. But in reality, once you're done with all your training and you have, our brains are worth millions of dollars. And I keep referring to like my physician clients, and I hope that the non-physicians on here are still able to find some value in what I'm saying. Whatever your profession is or your skills, you're so valuable that what I want them to be thinking about is like, I'm the diamond. I'm the diamond. There's way more need for doctors than there are doctors. And I'm going to show up and try to, like, I need to understand that I'm a diamond, even if they don't. And then if they're like, well, we don't have room for you, or we can't offer you that, we get to decide what we make that mean about us.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times I failed. I guess I'm not worth it. It's like, no, that maybe they just didn't have it in the budget, you know?
Right. It is always, it's rarely about us. And I think we take things so personally.
Yeah.
So Sarah says, this has been an incredibly valuable discussion. Thank you so much, Lisa and Karen. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. And it has been just so incredibly insightful. And I love all of the tips, the information, just all of it. And I do believe everything that you've brought doesn't matter if you're a doctor, whatever, but it's really owning our worth, asking for our worth, and not settling for something that we don't particularly want because it's just what's in front of us. So.
Yeah.
So is there a question or something that I didn't ask that you would love to make sure that people know?
I think it's not a question so much, but I really want to encourage everyone to just sort of lean into like what could be possible. Because our brains so quickly are like, I couldn't apply for that job. I don't have all the skills. I don't have what they want on my resume. And there's some data also that like the amount of qualifications that women feel they need to have before they go after something is way higher than like what a male counterpart would think they needed. So it's just about, what about the possibility? Oh, I couldn't possibly make that much in this job. Well, why not? What if it was possible? What would you have to do? I can't leave here because for me, it was like, I can't leave my clinic because I can't leave all my patients.
Right.
And I just was like, I can't. And then it was like, what if I could? And that's sort of like, what if I could move or make more or change careers or get a different job or go freelance or go part-time or say no to this or get more vacation? Just like, what if you could? Then
That's
just
so
explore it. Yeah.
What's possible when? What's possible if? What if you could? I think those are just such powerful questions. Can you recap book recommendations? Yes. Yeah. What were the books that you recommended?
Dr. Tamarin, you asked such a good question. So Women Don't Ask. I have a copy here by Babcock and Leshevre. I think it's from 2003. It might be a little outdated, but it has a lot of the data that substantiates this idea that part of the pay disparity is like women are not negotiating and we can. But it also talks about the challenges and the double bind, like you were talking about, why it can be challenging for us. And we have to be careful and thoughtful and like strategic in how we go about asking for things. And then Never Split the Difference is by Chris Voss. And it's just a thrilling read. It's just so interesting to hear about all these hostage situations that he did as the FBI hostage negotiator. And then there's a podcast, if there are women physicians on here, there's a podcast on negotiation for women doctors that's called Simply Worth It. It's Dr. Linda Street, and she is really like an amazing negotiation coach that I've learned so much from. And anyone who is looking to improve their skills or learn, she has there's 100 episodes, but you could search for one that's going to apply to what you need. And then I know you're going to ask me about this, Lisa, on my website, which is www.karenleitnermd.com. I do have a section on negotiation. So I have a talk that I give that sort of walks through some other pearls. And then I have a resource section for physicians about your contract and about other, I think these 2 books are actually listed on there also. So anyone's welcome to take a gander.
And would you mind posting the books, just the titles of the books in the discussion, in the LinkedIn discussion, when you can't actually do it while we're live on LinkedIn for some reason? I don't know why, but you can. But if you could just pop them in there. And I do want to mention that Kevin Voss, Keith, whatever he has never Split the Difference.
Yes.
He also has a masterclass, which is just so very good.
I'll check it out.
Dr. Clarissa Barnes, agree with benchmarking, what you should expect. It can be very difficult, especially. Yes, absolutely.
But it can work in your favor also, because if you don't know what the value is, then they can't tell you, you can challenge what they're saying because there's no set agreed upon standard. But yeah, when you're in that situation where you don't actually know the value of something, sometimes the wisdom is that it's better to let them go first so you don't put out a number and then they would have been willing to pay more and you anchor yourself low. And I think Chris Voss talks about that in the book too.
It's so good. So good. So you may have already answered this question from my previous question, but is there one thing that you would like people to take away today? Like, what's the most important thing that you think that they can just ponder and be curious about?
Now all that's coming up for me is like, you really are valuable. You really are. You have unique skills, a unique skill set. I don't care. Like, people will deflect all the reasons why they're not worth it. Or, so much of this is like, we're not very nice to ourselves. We have a ton of impostery thoughts. We have an inner critic that's saying mean things. And we just get to decide, like, how would I talk to my best friend if they were saying they wanted these things or they wanted to negotiate? Like, what would I say to them? And then listen to those things. Don't listen to the things that your brain is telling you about, because your brain is going to shut you down. Be like, it's too dangerous. It's too risky. Don't change anything. Don't do anything different. So we have to just find a way to like practice having some belief in ourselves and our value, regardless of what people are being messaging at us from the outside. And it's hard. And some of us are like messaged a lot harder things than others, right? I didn't really talk about, yes, as women, but like if you're an underrepresented, for racial reasons or for your gender identity or any of these things, it can be really challenging. And then I think it's just important to have support from the people who you feel close to, because it can be
so important.
A lot to go put yourself out there.
Community, I think, is key. And you mentioned the inner critic. I just want to mention a book called Playing Big by Tara Moore. She talks about the inner critic quite a bit, and it's so powerful that inner critic is there to keep you safe, but it's also very black and white. There's no curiosity. You are this, you can't have this. And it's very easy when you pause to learn a little bit more. It's very simple, not always easy, to discern between the inner critic and just fear that's kind of bubbling up for you so that you can question it. But it's, again, if it's black and white and it's negative, it's that inner critic, and it can stop you, but it doesn't have to. So
Yeah.
This has been such a delight. I so appreciate it. Where can people reach out to you? I know that you had said your website, but if you could repeat it, is there a social platform that you prefer?
Sure. Yes. So my website is www.karenleitnermd.com, and I'm on Instagram. It's at Karen Leitner MD. I have a Facebook group too, also for women doctors. But yeah, any of those places, I'm happy.
Okay.
I love to hear from people, and I have, I have resources to help with negotiation, whatever walk of life you're in. So if you're even considering doing it, I'm like, you have your whole life to get better at this. I have women who are, mid-career, towards the end of the career. They're like, it never occurred to me to do this before. It's never too late to start. And if you're super early on and you don't feel like you have good skills because you've never done it before, like, what a great place, what a great position to be in, because you're only going to get better. So just like do the hard thing. Like, you're going to feel like you're going to barf. It's okay. You're doing it right if you feel that way.
But you'll be so proud of yourself on the other side of it. You got to
no matter what,
work through the squirm, right? It's everything is on the other side of that squirm, that discomfort. And when
even if they say no to every single thing you asked, you still did a hard thing. You advocated for yourself. Like, it's still a success. You became a different person along that road, even if they give you nothing. It's good to know sometimes. It's good to be like, okay, there's no wiggle room here. Maybe I'm going to think about going elsewhere.
Absolutely. Sorry.
Our meditation timer. Is that what we need to do now?
Zoom. It starts to shift the lens and shift the belief when we start shifting our behavior. So I absolutely love it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. This is so fun.
So next week, May 31st, I have Kimberly Spiegel. She's talking about networking for internal engagement, but also for professional development. So please stop by next week, May 31st at 11 a.m. for a conversation. I saw Kimberly speak at a conference, and she is absolutely phenomenal. You will love what she has to say. So thank you everyone who joined us today. If you're watching on the replay, please hit #replay or type in #replay. And if you connect to Dr. Karen Leitner, I missed that in the beginning. I'm so sorry about that. Dr. Karen Leitner, please just let her know that you saw her on Sustainable Leadership Live, and do reach out and connect with her. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you next week.
All right. Take care.
Bye, Dr. Karen. Bye.